see everybody. And so hope you all had a good week. I had mostly a good week. So, that's good. And we're going to look at Ecclesiastes. And good to see Michelle back because this is her favorite part of Scripture, she says. Ecclesiastes chapter 3. That's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and we'll open in a word of prayer and begin. Heavenly Father, we thank you again for the opportunity to come and to be able to be in this building and to, in freedom and safety, we can worship and we can study and we can learn and we can communicate. And Lord, there are just so many things in your word that just, frankly, blows my mind sometimes. I just thank you so much for it. And I pray that as we study, that your Holy Spirit will help us to understand the meaning and also to see application, that we might walk in a more worthy way before you. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so last week, among other things, we talked about the fact that Solomon hated life and he hated the fruit of his labor. And we mentioned that most of us have known somebody like that who's kind of a downer and hates everything about life. But Solomon's hatred, as it were, is based upon his reasoning and his wisdom and not necessarily for his immediate circumstances like so many people. Now, does anyone remember specifically why he hated the fruit of his labor? He's getting old. And Levi? There you go. Yeah. He lamented the fact that all the work that he had done is going to be passed on to somebody else. And what's that person going to be like? I mean, he has no idea. I mean, as a king, he gets to designate who's going to be the next king. Well, sometimes. Some monarchies, it's automatically number one. But at any rate, Solomon can choose, and yet even his choice may or may not be a good choice. He has no idea what's going to happen. So that's why he kind of hated life. Now, the section kind of ended with an epiphany. It says, eat and drink and enjoy life. It is a gift from God. So I say it's an epiphany because he's been looking at life almost exclusively from under the sun, from a human perspective. And all of a sudden, you see this glimmer of hope where he says, actually, what we need to do is we need to eat and drink and find satisfaction in God. It's one of 6 epiphanies that occur during the book of Ecclesiastes. We turned to chapter 3, verses 1 to 8, which we read last week, and most of us are familiar with this. Us that are older remember a song named Turn, Turn, Turn by the Byrds in 1965, and that song isn't a worship song, it's a protest song. They're protesting the escalation going on in Vietnam. So even though it's God's word, it definitely is out of context. But at any rate, we see that we have 14 sets of polar opposites. And these 14 sets of polar opposites, amazingly, seem to describe all of life and where you can be at any given time. I mean, you may be in 2 or 3 places at once, but it's just kind of like the ups and downs of life in a capsule from verses 2 to 8. We see that we're always in the midst of either joy, grief, prosperity, heartache, love, etc. Here's a question for you. As you read those verses, do you think Solomon regarded this particular cycle as a positive or a negative? What would you think? Any thoughts, ideas, guesses? Is this a positive thing for Solomon or is it a negative thing for him? Levi? What? Yeah, good. Thank you. So I also agree with you. I think he saw it as a negative because of the boring repetition. Chuck Swindoll, in one of his messages, said the same thing, so you're in good company there, Levi. He said that he felt that Solomon's almost sick to his stomach with it all. It's just this and this and this and this. Whereas on the other hand, you can flip over and look at this and say, this is amazing because it is so profound. I mean, it really is. It lists almost everything that you're going to be going through at life at one time or another. So it can be seen as positive, but I don't think Solomon saw it as a positive. Here's a question for the class. How do people react when they come face to face with something that they cannot control? Lem. So they act like they don't want to do it. Okay, so they're encountering something that they don't want to do. They may know how to do it, but they may mess up, or they're afraid they may mess up. Is that kind of like what you're saying? How about somebody else? You're encountering something that you have absolutely no control over. Peggy? Anger. Why? That's so true, yes. Daniel? Frustration? Okay. You're frustrated because? You can't make it work, right? You can't. Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Desperation? Okay. Okay. Cry out to the Lord in desperation, which is a good thing. Levi? Okay. They try to lasso it. In other words, they do try to get control, or they flee from it. Does that sound accurate, what you're saying? Okay, good. Anyone else? Daniel? Feeling of failure. Okay. This has happened because I messed up. Okay? Sometimes it is because I messed up. You know? Yes, my lovely wife. Okay, you panic, no quick solution. Teresa? I smile because I immediately think about Costco, right? When the pandemic hit. What's the one thing you can control at Costco? How much toilet paper you got, right? By golly, I can control that, mostly. Somebody else had a hand up. I don't want to miss anyone. Oh, Bill. That's purely theoretical, Bill. That was me last week. Go ahead, Sarah. Okay. Excellent. Excellent point. Now here's another idea, because automatically, what did you think of? Bad stuff, right? Automatically. But is it always just bad stuff? Do good things happen you can't control? Mr. Johnson, this didn't happen. Mr. Johnson, there's a relative you don't even know. He left you $3 million. I can't control that, but that's fine. That's great. What a wonderful thing to have no control over, in a sense, right? But I know we mostly think about negative things because that's the way life is, it seems. We do focus on the negative much more than the positive. So excellent. So look at the title. The title is God is Control and We Are Not. I know, it's really profound, right? So that's what I think Solomon, one of the main points he's making here. So let's go ahead and read through the passage. We'll begin at verse 9. We'll start over there with Lem, and we'll read through from verse 9 all the way to 22. I guess we'll start with Daniel then. Chapter Ecclesiastes 3, verse 9. And Lori, verse 15 there. Verse 19, if you have it there, Michelle. Sue, would you mind reading that last one? Thank you. All right, so we're looking, the first section is verses 9 to 11. We look at kind of Solomon's summation. So we read verses 2 to 8 last week, a time to give birth, a time to die, etc., which are the bookends for the whole thing. And then he sums this up. He says, what profit is there to the worker from that in which he toils? Now, another way to look at that profit is, how does this benefit me? So you look at these verses, the summation of life in these 14 phrases. So Solomon says, how does this benefit me? Making a profit. So what is the benefit? Is there a benefit to those 14 phrases, would you say, from your perspective? Do you see a benefit at all? Any thoughts on that? Yes, Aaron. Nice, thank you. You know, that's one thing I don't think I mentioned last week that I meant to, because I kind of ran out of time. Most of these things involve others. You know, you look at these events and these phrases, I mean, some can be seen as an individual thing, but mostly they involve others, your interaction with others and things that occur. So we are always interacting with other people, and how are we to interact in such a way as to benefit them? As Aaron mentions, to weep with those that weep. You know, there's a real benefit to having someone come alongside and weep with you when you're suffering. It just, I don't know what it is. Somehow it's, I was going to say a fancy word, cathartic. How do you say it, Sarah? Is that cathartic? Okay, thank you. I said it right. That's good. I try to sound smart, and that always happens. I think that's how God humbles me, you know, keeps me humble. School, S-K-O-O-L, school, you know, anyway. Now, what Solomon, I don't think Solomon's celebrating with his poetry. I don't think when Solomon looks at that he's necessarily seeing the positive things that we're trying to do. But they're there. I think for him, again, he sees life almost from the perspective as a victim. I mean, I'm not saying he is, but as I read those verses, if I read the verses 2 to 8 and with a certain bent, I can almost see them as a victim. You know, how much control do you have when things happen? And you can almost develop a victim mentality, which is very popular in our culture. Verse 10 says, I have seen the task which God has given the sons of men with which to occupy themselves. Now, one thing I get from that verse I looked at, and that is this. Solomon understands better than most. Solomon knows what he's talking about. Now, what I do is I say, well, what's the other stuff he said? Remember the hydrologic cycle, the wind circle cycle, things that we didn't discover until millennia later. 1,500 years, 2,000 years later, we're going, hey, did you know the wind goes in a circle? And Solomon goes, yeah, I wrote about that, So my point is, if Solomon knows about stuff like that we couldn't figure out, we can probably have some confidence in the other things that he says, that he knows what he's talking about here too. So we can give a little more credence to what he is saying. It's interesting too, it says, the task which God has given the sons of men with which to occupy themselves. When you hear that phrase, occupy themselves, what comes to mind? Or does anything come to mind for you? Sarah? Keep inside with mischief? Okay, good. Busy work? Yeah. All of us, some of us are still have little kids, and others have had little kids. I see you looking there, Bill. We got to give him something to occupy himself, It's Teresa. Yes. Right. Idle hands are the devil's playground. Exactly right. I actually wrote that down as a quote, right? I mean, that's found in what? First Hezekiah? No, anyway. But it's true, right? The idea is if you have too much spare time on your hands, you might find something bad to do. And I actually believe that's part of the reason that God put us in the situation that we're in, where we have so much struggle and strife and work and difficulty, because it keeps us from doing other stupid things that maybe we would do if we had nothing but spare time on our hands. And to to give that weight, look at people who do have lots of time on their hands. They do tend to get involved in sin and difficulty. So this is actually a benefit for us, although at the time it doesn't seem like a benefit, but it is. Verse 11 is just full of stuff. God has made everything appropriate. Another word for that, which I actually like better, is beautiful. It could be either way. Beautiful or appropriate in its time. He has also set eternity in their heart, yet so that man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning even to the end. I spent lots of time hacking away at that verse. So we see everything is beautiful in its time for your notes if you're writing those down. It just fits, that is to say when the time is right, it just fits and seems absolutely perfect. Now, often when I'm teaching, I like to flip things around and look at them from the other side because it kind of gives more illumination to the flip side. When are things not beautiful in their time? Can you think of an example when somebody does something that at another time might be fine, but not so much here? I think of Job's friends. For several days, they stood there in silence, and they were benefiting Job. And then they started to talk. Okay? Now, I know that it's God's will. We have the book of Job. If they hadn't talked, we wouldn't have the book of Job. Okay, I get that. But just from the perspective of benefiting someone at the right time, that probably wasn't the right time, and it definitely wasn't the right time to be accusing him like it's his fault that all these bad things happen, which is exactly what his friends were saying. Bill? Oh, nice.
And that song goes that he knew this one girl, but it just never really worked out. And he saw her later after he was married, and he realized that wasn't the right one for him. And so oftentimes when a person is so content that they want to, have this relationship, but it doesn't work out, that's not God's timing. And we can push that and even sin, but it still creates difficulties instead of just moving on.
Great. That's an excellent illustration. Marriage, which is huge, obviously. You want to do it at the right person, the right time, for sure. Another thing I was thinking about, a faux pas would be like to laugh during a funeral. When you're not supposed to laugh, you know what I mean? There's times when you can laugh if somebody's giving some memories of somebody that's funny, but not when you're doing a eulogy or something. No. So that's when something's not beautiful because it's not the right time. But when the timing is right, it's just beautiful. Or like Aaron mentioned, somebody comes alongside you and weeps with you. I mean, that's beautiful. That you just can't beat that kind of thing. Also, it talks about God sets eternity in our hearts. Now, this is huge. I spent a lot of time. God sets eternity in our hearts. What does that mean? What does that mean that he sets eternity in our hearts? What would you think? It's a huge statement. Any thoughts? Jen? Okay. Right, made to live forever. That's what we're made to do. Good. Mark, did you have something else? Oh, wow. Oh, nice. That's nicely done. Peggy. Yes, Augustine, that's what he said. We have that, I'm paraphrasing that, God-sized hole in our hearts that only he fits into, and we keep trying to stuff stuff in there, and it just never gets full because only God can fill it. Excellent. Turn over to, hold your place and turn over to Romans chapter 1 just for a second. In Romans chapter 1, verse 18, it says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that they are without excuse." Everybody's without excuse. We know. We know there's a God. We know that he created us. We have, in Romans 1, it says that this is suppressed, that people go out of their way to try to deny this because they don't want to have the thought that they're responsible to an eternal being who happens to have standards that nobody can meet, essentially. Francis Crick, who's one of the two discoverers of DNA, that is to say, discoverers of how it was formed, he used to tell his students when they were studying DNA, now I want you to remember to say to yourself every so often, this evolved, this evolved, this evolved. Why? Because it's obvious it didn't evolve. Because nothing of that complexity can assemble itself. So he wants them to maintain their atheistic view, and that's what happens in schools and whatnot, higher learning. It evolved. And then you go, but there's too many other things that say it was created. But they suppress it. But yet we know that there is a God. Even atheists know this. There's a phrase that one of the atheist brothers used. I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. But he says, we know that there is no God and we hate him. Right? Yep, that pretty much sums it up. And yet, in verse 11, we still see that God is still a mystery to us. Even though we have this eternity in our hearts, we are made to live forever, yet man will not find out the work which God has done from the beginning to the end. So God's work is still a mystery to us, even though we do have certain tidbits of knowledge, inclinations, thoughts. We still can't know it all. And the reason I say that, that's what Solomon's trying to do. This whole book is Solomon sifting through this stuff and trying to find the answer to that. And he didn't, really. And neither do we, because this life under the sun does not provide satisfaction. It doesn't fill that God-shaped hole that we have in our hearts. So we can't figure out or control much of what is in our own lives, hence the chimney thing that Bill referred to a few minutes ago, much less billions of people over countless generations. Now picture in your mind, one thing I'd like us, if nothing else in this class today, somehow grasp how vast God is. That He can know billions of people individually as if you're the only one there at the same time, and He can control the generations of that and make them all linked together, and make them linked together today, linked together 1,000 years from now, should Lord tarry, linked together in the past. Who can do that kind of thing? I mean, only God can do that, have that kind of vastness and that power. Only He can do that. So here's a question. Is there real freedom, or is freedom an illusion? This is a philosophical question from philosophy class. Is there real freedom, or is freedom an illusion? What would you say? Steve?
That's basically what the book of Job is.
Okay.
When Satan comes before God, he accuses God of manipulating Job. Job really doesn't have any free will. He's just a product of God's benefits to him. And Satan refuses to. Job will simply respond, if you take the blessings away, he will curse you.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, good. That's nice. Nice. Aaron? Okay, we're going to serve somebody, so we'll choose. Okay, good. So, anyone else? Is freedom real, or is it an illusion? Bill. Mm-hmm.
Are we all predestined to be in a hole and we can't break out of that hole? Well, there's certain parts of that that is true.
Mm-hmm.
We're born in a specific place. We're going to move around at a specific time. But there is choices. And these people, that Romans passage that we read before, those people had chosen not to have anything to do with God. In fact, they could have honored God and given Him thanks and put something about themselves, but they chose not to. And there is this element of choice of doing good or being destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And because given that joy of doing good, that Ephesians talks about, we are created for good works.
Mm-hmm.
Here he goes along with Ephesians.
Yes.
And that whole idea that, we have this choice of are we going to do good or do evil in our lives? And the key there is fear God. Therefore, you fear Him.
Okay.
Or should, you don't.
Right. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? Joe.
When I was in the military, we each had the freedom to do something stupid. We had the freedom, but there was going to be consequences.
Yep.
So
You did have freedom.
we had freedom to do something stupid because the penalty was going to be consequences when we did it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, obviously, I believe in freedom. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
I think you start, there's an arena of thought here that we need to close at this time.
Well, I hope to do that, but anyway, go ahead.
You're never going to close the middle. This idea of freedom versus predestination.
Mm-hmm.
Going on ever since man started with the planet. I think it's one
Yes.
My thoughts are higher than your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And as men, we tend to be arrogant, and we forget who we are, and we forget the limitations that we have, because we both have freedom and we have predestination at the same time.
Yep.
On a human basis, they're in direct conflict with each other. But the truth is, both are true.
Right. Right. And these are the simple things that God has told us, I think, because he gives us these tidbits that might be sort of understandable: the Trinity, eternality, predestination, free will. It makes no sense to us. Well, that's right, God says. That's why I don't tell you much more, because you'll explode, right? Obviously, there's real freedom. If there wasn't real freedom, God couldn't hold me accountable for my choices. If I was completely a robot, this and that, then I do what I do, and no one can hold me accountable. But God does hold me accountable. So as far as the predestination goes, one of the best examples I ever came across is written by an author named John Phillips. He's a British theologian. He also wrote a New Testament translation, which is fantastic. He says, picture yourself, I've used this illustration, I think, before in the class. Picture yourself, you just learned how to play chess yesterday. I mean, you barely remember the moves the pieces can make. And you sit down in front of a grandmaster chess player. Who's going to win? The grandmaster, and he'll win whenever he wants. Will he violate your free will and your moves? Well, I mean, he may, but no. He'll let you make whatever move you want, and you're going to find yourself in checkmate. Whenever the grandmaster says, I'm done with the game, I need a nap, boom, checkmate. Right? Now, obviously, the difference between us and God is much, much more than that, as Steve says. I know I'm way outside my pay grade here, right? But if a chess master can do that and not violate my free will, is God going to have a problem with that? And the answer is no. He'll have no trouble with that whatsoever, because he is the master. Let's look at verses 12 and 15 again, real quick. I know that there is nothing better for them than to rejoice and to do good in one's lifetime. Moreover, that every man who eats and drinks sees good in all his labor. It is the gift of God. I know that everything God does will remain forever. There is nothing to add to it, and there's nothing to take away from it. For God has so worked that men should fear him. That which is has already been, and that which will be has already been. I guess I misread that. Okay, for God seeks what has passed by. So I see two categories here: our best situation and then God's best. And the best situation in verse 12 is to see joy in the now. Again, to see joy in the now. Here's a question: who does this better than anybody else in the world? Who lives in the now better than anyone else? Is that a baby? I didn't think about that. Okay, who else? A baby does, for sure. This always happens. I think I got this drilled. No, I don't. Joe. Extremely old person. It's kind of lost their mind. They have to live in the now? Yeah, okay, you're not referring to anyone in political office. No, I mean he's not. I'm just verifying that. A golden retriever. Who lives in the now better than a golden retriever? Oh boy, this is the best meal of my life. Oh boy, I love you. Let's play ball. This is the best day ever. And tomorrow will be the best day ever, and so will the next. A golden retriever. And my daughter has German Shepherds, and they feel the same way too, but a golden retriever. Now, when I say that, I'm being a little facetious, because a golden retriever does live in the now. Now, if you choose to live exclusively in the now, then you're missing something else too. You may have joy in the moment, but there's more to it, as we're going to see. If you do live in the now by itself, it's not enough any more than it is, well, it is for a golden retriever, but not for us. And also we need to remember, as I wrote on my notes here, our now is slipping away. Our now is going day by day, step by step. Three of my daughters are married. Yes. 3. And for all 3 of them, I had a conversation with them just a few weeks before they were married. And I didn't have the conversation like, this is what I do, but it was based on what I saw. I said, you know, you're going to be married in however many weeks it is. And that's so cool. And I know that's all you can think about. But try to step back every now and then and look around, because you'll never be here again like this. You'll never be living in our home the same way like this. So try to enjoy the moment every now and then, as well as looking forward, because our now is slipping away. And if you live too much in the future, you will miss the now. God's best. He controls the now. He controls yesterday. He controls tomorrow. Again, countless generations, billions of people. God controls all that stuff. He does. Verse 14 says, we can add nothing to God's work. So God does His work. There's nothing you or I can add. You know what irritates me? I cannot remember the last time God came to me for advice. Right? How absurd would that be? Jeff, what do you think? I don't know, and I'm afraid to say. God's work is perfect and complete. Now, it may not seem like that to us at the time. When something happens, we go, man, this is really bad. I can't see any positive thing in this, and you probably can't. But God is in control. He absolutely can bring positive effects out of whatever situation that you're in. You know, Pastor quoted Romans 8:28 a couple weeks ago. We know this, that all things work together for good for those who are I forget, to those who are called by God, who are called according to His will. I'm paraphrasing just a bit. Now, it doesn't mean everything is good, and he mentioned that. It doesn't mean everything is good, but everything will work together because God is in control. And He will make it work for good. Another one of the mysteries of man is how that God can use our very own sin nature, the sin of others, the sin of organizations, to make you and I more like Him. He uses that like a chisel. He uses our own sin nature. He uses all these things to help us to see our need for Him and to make Him more like Him. Also, we see there's nothing new, which we've talked about before. Verse 15, it's an interesting sentence. It's kind of hard to grasp. It says, God seeks what has passed by. I went through a lot of time looking at that, trying to figure out what it means. I think it means this. Nothing escapes God's scrutiny. Whether it's in the past, future, now, nothing escapes God's scrutiny. He sees it all. There's nothing that is hidden. Also, it carries with it the idea of God being above time. We've talked about this before. God is above time. You and I are in the middle of it, and it's going one way. Okay? God's above time, and I think that God can look down on time like a yardstick or like a pool of water He can stick His hand in anytime He wants. Because He's God, and He's above all these things, and He sees them simultaneously. I think that God looks over here, and He sees Abraham about ready to stab Isaac. He looks over here, He sees Moses. He sees Jesus on the cross. He sees you and I in this classroom. I think He sees it all as if it's happening at once. Don't ask me how, but that's kind of how I see it with Him living above time. And nothing escapes the timeline, or His scrutiny on the timeline. Verse 16, furthermore, I have seen under the sun that in the place of justice there is wickedness, and in the place of righteousness there is wickedness. I said to myself, God will judge both the righteous man and the wicked man, for a time for every matter and for every deed is there. Now in Hebrew, this expresses surprise. I genuinely think that Solomon is surprised that he goes and he starts checking out the court system. He checks out the place of righteousness, which I think probably refers to the temple and the worship of the temple. He finds wickedness there. Now, when you think about Solomon's reign before he went astray, what occurs to your mind thinking about Solomon's reign? What kind of a reign do you think it would have been? Do you think it would have been, peaceful, equitable, unfair? What do you think it would have been to live under his government, Levi? Nice, luxurious, godly time. Okay, good. Teresa? Heavily taxed. Good, good. Others. Bill.
Early on, he did really well.
Yeah.
Later on, when he started marrying all the wives, he set up high places which were detestable, and that became a snare to all the people as well.
Yes. And you know what? This is toward the end of his life, remember. That's when we think this is written. And so he goes into the courts. It seems that he's surprised. There's wickedness there. He goes in the temple. Well, part of that's probably due to what he did and what he allowed to happen. So for us, we also have a hard time when we hear about wickedness in the court system, or when we, in churches, when there's wickedness that raises its head in churches and whatnot. It really bothers us. Why is that? Why does it bother us so much? And it does. It shouldn't be there, right? And what is the court for? The court is supposedly to sift the situations to find out the guilty and acquit the innocent. So often, it doesn't work that way. So often, the guilty, and you know they're guilty, they get off. You go, how does that happen? That doesn't make any sense. Or in churches, when you see terrible things happen in churches, you go, what in the world? How can that be? That doesn't make any sense. And Solomon is kind of surprised as well. The most heinous example in the Bible would be what? The most heinous example of wickedness in court and wickedness in religious system. Peggy? Right. Jesus. You know, Jesus was charged by the religious people. He then was destroyed by the Roman government, their court system. So there's the most heinous example. The Son of God himself was a victim of the situation. So we shouldn't be surprised to see that. But it does seem wrong. And by the way, this is a common objection to theism. The word theism basically means a belief in God. It's what atheists argue about the goodness of God. You know, because things are bad, well, God, there can't be a God. And what, like I quoted before another pastor, his name was Fulton Bontaine from down in Tacoma, and at one time he held up a calculator. He says, would you all agree that this is a computer? Would you? It is. It is a computer. Absolutely. Now, could you use this little computer to run the flights in and out of SeaTac Airport on a given day? Would you trust your life to this calculator? Not even, right? Because it doesn't have the capacity to do that. And he's likening that to us and God. We tell God, you can't exist because there's evil there. And God's saying, I'm way above your pay grade, right? I mean, we can't even see how God can use evil to bring about good. You look at somebody like Chuck Colson, who was Nixon's hatchet man. When you want somebody axed, symbolically, you go to Chuck Colson and he would do it. He'd make sure that whoever needed to get whacked, not real physically, but he's the one. And how he goes to prison, God brings life to him, salvation. He goes out and his ministry becomes prison reform primarily. That's what he does. So you look at that and you go, Chuck Colson, he should have been condemned, which he did spend time in jail, but he should have never got out and this and this and this and gone to hell. And then what God does is he does something that you can't even imagine that he would do. Because he works above evil. We don't like evil. It's a part of our lives, but God is in control. People who deny that, like I said, they don't have the capacity to understand. So you ask yourself, why is this so? Why is there these situations in courts and in the church? And what you do, if you honestly ask yourself that question, walk into the bathroom, flip on the light, and take a good long look in the mirror. That's why. Because of our sin nature. Because we're sinners, everything that we touch is tainted by sin, including the judicial system and even the church. If we're not careful, we have to be on constant vigilance about that. However, real justice is coming. There's no question that real justice is coming. Now, another question, what is the expectation of a man under the sun? A person who's living in this life alone, what might be his or her expectation of justice? What would it look like? You'd expect, oh, go ahead, Aaron. Yeah, immediately in my way. Okay, good. Jen. Right. And you want to see it, don't you? Yeah, yeah. I heard a pastor one time say, we are notorious for saying this: Dear Lord, please give them what they deserve. Give them what they deserve. Please give me mercy. Right? Yeah. However, sometimes God gives them mercy because, like in Chuck Colson's case, he's going to convert him and use him to change all sorts of other things that we can't even imagine. But there is. Now, wisdom literature in the Bible typically had this idea of here and now. But we know that judgment isn't just here and now. Sometimes we see it, but other times we don't. And we know that in time to come there will be judgment. For the sinner, it's the great white throne judgment. And of course, for us who know Christ, it's the Bema Seat. The Bema Seat is a place of reward. Our sin has been paid for by Jesus. It's gone. So we're not going to get whacked because of our sin. He's going to review our lives to see what rewards he can give us. That's what we're going to be judged for, versus the sinners that are judged, and then they're cast into the lake of fire. Yes?
Oftentimes when you read the Old Testament, there is not a lot of concept of life after death.
Yes.
But here it is in this verse.
Okay. Okay.
Where God's going to judge, and when you're finished, it's not over.
That's correct. That is correct. It's not over when it's over. For most of us, it's just beginning. Okay, last section here. Verse 18. I said to myself concerning the sons of men, God has surely tested them in order for them to see that they are but beasts. For the fate of the sons of men and the fate of beasts is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. Indeed, they all have the same breath, and there is no advantage for man over beast, for all is vanity. All go to the same place. All came from the dust, and all return to the dust. Who knows that the breath of man ascends upward, and the breath of the beast descends downward to the earth? I have seen that nothing is better than that man should be happy in his activities, for that is his lot. For who will bring him to see what will occur after him? Solomon refers to us as beasts. Why does Solomon call us beasts? What does he point out to say that we're beasts? We're going to die, just like that golden retriever, right? We're going to die just like them. Now, he says we all go to the same place. Now, this is one of those passages that we have to be very careful when we look at that, because you could come to the conclusion that there is no afterlife. Because according to Solomon, there is no certainty of our afterlife. That is to say, under the sun. If you're looking at life exclusively from a human perspective under the sun, there is no evidence of an afterlife. And that is true. So from that perspective, you're no better than the dog who dies or the cat that dies. You're just going to die and go into the ground just like they did. And because of that, there's a hollow conclusion which says, don't worry, be happy. Okay? From the perspective of the human, regular human being, this is all there is. And that's what Solomon is quoting here. So that's why I say it's important to remember the context, because you could say that Solomon is stating an untruth, because the rest of the Bible makes it very clear that there's an afterlife and there is judgment and accountability. But from the human perspective, it doesn't seem to be that way. Now, some time ago, and I think I used this in the apologetics class we had, Richard Dawkins, who's one of the more popular atheists, was asked a question one time. He says, Mr. Dawkins, let's assume for a moment that there is a God, and you have an opportunity to speak to him. What's one thing that you would ask him? Without hesitation, he says, why have you hidden yourself? Why have you hidden yourself? We discussed during the class, has God hidden himself? And the answer is yes and no. It's yes and no. Okay? Now, the reason I say that is if you choose to reject God and say there is no God, you can live your life as if there is no God. You'll have no trouble doing that. Everything supports you. Modern science, that is to say, secular science supports you. Our culture supports you. Our political system supports you. Everything, the educational system supports you. There is no God. It's easy to do. And God, I think, has designed things in such a way that if you want to reject him, God says, okay, you can reject me, and you can go through life and never be bothered about God. I really believe that. However, before anyone steps out and leaves, has God hidden himself? No. Because when you know God or seek to know God, you'll see his fingerprints. You'll see them all over. It'll be like fireworks sometimes. The other person won't see it because he rejects God. You do because you acknowledge God and you trust in God. Yesterday, my daughter Josie went to Baker City, Oregon. She's meeting with a couple of friends that she worked with in Idaho Falls. And she gives us a call, and oh no, my low tire pressure indicator is going off. Oh no, you're 4 hours away. Well, listen, is it still inflated? I think so. Okay, well, find a Les Schwab, and they'll repair the tire. Oh, there's one right here. 2 minutes away, she's in Les Schwab and getting the tire repaired. Now, some of you will say, well, if God was God, he didn't have to make the tire go flat. I know. But how does God get more glory? By making the tire go flat and saying, look, here I am. For us, we say, there's God's fingerprints. For the person who doesn't believe, she had a flat tire. Oh, it just happened to be, right? How many times has that been with you? It just happened to be. And it's God. If you want to see him, you can see him. Solomon says we're beasts because we died. Now, God says that we're beasts too, right? But for a different reason. Because we have rebelled against him. We have joined Adam's rebellion, and that's the reason that we're beasts. Now, here's another thought. Why are beasts, animals, why are they beasts? Why are there predators? Why are there carnivores? Levi? They don't have a conscience, no right from wrong. That is true. Aaron? Yeah. It's their nature. It is their nature, but there's a reason it's their nature. Jen? I agree with that. It's staggering to the mind to think about the fact that my sin, Adam's sin, corrupted the animal kingdom in such a way that you now have predators and carnivores. Before that, it's going to be like they talk about during the millennial kingdom. You see a lion, you can walk up the lion, good kitty, and have your hand back when you're done, right? Good kitty. Lay down beside a snake, a viper, It would have been that way before the fall. But after the fall, now everything's different. Beasts are beasts because of us. That's an interesting thought, isn't it? Bill? Yes.
So it's referring to the body.
Yes.
And yes, the body's going to go to the same place animals do, it's back to the dust.
Right.
God says that. But the difference is in Genesis, it talks about finding a soul in man, and that he was created in the image of God. It's way different on that. And Solomon's not referring to that. There's just a little inkling of that.
Yes.
Who knows that the breath, animals go down and man goes up. That's the whole information of that soul thing.
Yes.
Here we're only talking about the body.
That's exactly right. But I also think he's, in the midst of all this questioning that he's doing, that's a part of it too. That's why he says it counts. Who knows? Well, God knows. Yeah. We need a new birth. We do need a new birth. We are the beasts. We're the reason the beasts are the beasts. We're the reason the political system's messed up, the church can get messed up. We are the reason. The person in the mirror. We need a new birth. We need to have Christ come in our lives through salvation and create a new person. Now then, even then, it's no guarantee you're not going to sin. In fact, the guarantee is you're still going to sin. But the difference is you're going to want to serve the Lord. You're going to want to confess when you sin. You're going to turn to the Lord when you run away from the Lord, because His Spirit is within you, and His Spirit will prompt you to do these things. But we need a new birth. So Solomon's looking at life. It doesn't make sense. God is there, but he seems, or even after